What's up, guys? In this video I want to show you how I optimize my night vision gear for without WROL. Alright guys, we're going to start from the beginning, setting up your helmet properly. I'll tell you how I do it, but you want to keep a few things in mind when you're setting up your helmet. First is going to be comfort. The second thing is going to be balance. Setting up your suspension system and your pad system in the right way can either make or break your helmet. So you want to make sure that you take your time and set it up relative to your head size so it'll be comfortable and you can wear this thing for hours at a time and you can maintain a nice upright balance. So I like to take everything off, and I'm talking about the nod, the mounts, the counterweight, so I can work on the helmets alone before I bring other variables into the equation. Because if the helmet is offset or unbalanced by itself, what do you think is going to happen when you add more weight to the front end? Of course, it's just going to be that much worse, and you have to compensate by adding more weight in the rear to off-balance it, and that's just more weight on your head, your neck, and your shoulders. When you set up your pads, you should orient them in such a way that when you put this thing on your head, it should sit completely upright, be secure without the chin strap, and you can look at the arc rail or the M-lock, make sure it's parallel with the ground, and you should have, give or take, about an inch gap between your brow line and the front center lip of your helmet. Then go ahead and buckle your suspension system and slowly tighten it while you're watching the helmet to make sure it's not moving, dipping down, dipping backwards. Make sure it's not moving. Slowly tighten it just to the point where it cups your chin and your cheeks. You should not need to add tension to the point where it digs in to the skin in your cheek or your chin. That's why you want to make sure you set up the pads correctly. Now what I recommend you do is take your mount, could be a Wilcox, a Wolchan, a Rhino, doesn't matter. Take it, connect it inside your shroud, and try to move it. If it moves, and most likely it will, even if you have a genuine Wilcox mount, it probably will move. Get some tape, stack a few layers, and start to shim it with the tape. See if that helps. If it doesn't, add some more right here. Maybe even add some at the bottom until you take out all of that wobble. Because we are working with a lot of variables right here. We got the helmet, the shroud, the mount, a J-arm possibly, then the nod. That's a lot of things that could each have their own independent tolerance, and we want to try to minimize as much as possible so when we're actually using our night vision and moving, it's not moving or wobbling in front of our face. Alright, now I want to show you how I tie down a PVS-14. And this is not the way, this is just a way. I will tie down to the anchor point that is on every PVS-14. I use a bowline knot secured to that anchor point. After that, I use a clove hitch knot to wrap around the entire housing of the PVS-14. And the reason I do that is just in case this thing falls off with the J-arm, the Wilcox mount, and it falls off with all that weight and force. I don't want all that force and weight to be on this tiny little piece of polymer, which theoretically could probably pretty easily break off in the right situation. So now my piece of paracord has a hold of the entire housing of the PVS-14. After I do that, I will connect it in my Wilcox mount. I will use the paracord to wrap in front of my dovetail. I do it twice because I make sure I have enough cordage to do it twice. Just be careful on the Wilcox mounts, they do have wiring. You don't want to mess up that wiring. Then I go underneath the bungee, add some tension, and Velcro it to the top of my helmet. This is just a Velcro square which has some cordage on it, I guess, to maintain wires on a plate carrier or chest rig. They used to use these more than they do now. I tie it off to that, so it has a hold of the entire PVS-14. Wrap it in front of the dovetail. Now, even if I press the button, or theoretically if the dovetail fails, that paracord is holding my PVS-14 and J-arm into my Wilcox mount. So if it breaks or fails, it's not going to fall out. I go underneath that bungee to retain the wire, and in case this Velcro patch comes off, it gets caught right there at that bungee. If your helmet is balanced out with your pads and your suspension system efficiently, you should not need anything significant in terms of counterweights. Especially for one PVS 14, even if you have just a very lightweight bump helmet. I put batteries in here. I want to have something useful inside this pouch instead of having dead weight in there with some lead weights like some people use. Even if I have to take these things out and use them, it's still balanced pretty well with the pad and suspension system alone. Now we'll move on to articulating the mount and setting up the PVS 14. One of the most important articulations on the Wilcox mount is this little knob right here, which will adjust the pitch angle of the PVS 14. You want to take advantage of that. You do not want to have to dip your head downward or upward to see straight and level out of the PVS 14. So position it relative to your M-lock and your head. If you can see, I have it pitched up ever so slightly. The reason I do that is so I can more easily see under it and to the sides. I do most of the time have about 2 inches of eye relief, and that's because I don't want to lose any of my peripheral vision and lose situational awareness. I do understand in some situations you might want to have this thing sucked up close to your eye and even use that eye cup so you can hide the light coming off of your ocular lens, which will be an advantage or a disadvantage in some situations. So in my opinion, the application or situation will dictate the amount of eye relief that you actually need to use. After you set your eye relief, then adjust your diopter, but make sure you set your eye relief first. If you happen to wear glasses, I'm sure you know exactly where to set this to. I do not wear glasses. I have it set to 0. I can see fine out of it at 0. And that way I don't have any negative or positive magnification, which can have an effect on my depth perception. Manually focusing your night vision is something you do want to practice often, so you can get very quick and efficient at going back and forth from an up-close focus to an infinite focus. Situation will dictate it, but you'll need to go back and forth a lot. So practice it so you get good at it. The use of some type of focus cap, which you can make very easily out of a day cap or a bikini cap cover, is sometimes beneficial. I've made this one out of a Compton 4 bikini cap cover. It's large enough to go over an entire sacrificial lens, so when I put this on, it gives me a nice balanced focus up close, further away. It does have one drawback. It does limit the amount of light you can take into your intensifier tube. I will show you 2 videos of me using this. First one, I have a focus to infinity. Second one, I have a focus up close. I start both the videos with the cap on, take it off, put it on a few times. Here are those 2 videos back to back. Manual gain, if you have that feature on your nod, is sometimes misused. I see it a lot. People will just crank it up 100% and have it there all the time, which is not the best idea. You can lessen the lifespan of your tube. You can more easily get things like artificial artifacts if you're using, say, a high-power laser, or there are lights around you. So what you want to do is turn it all the way down and slowly adjust it just to the point where it's absolutely necessary to see relative to the ambient light that's present in your environment. Just remember, no amount of manual gain will compensate for no ambient light. If you have everything dialed in and set up correctly, you should not be getting any type of eye strain, eye fatigue, and definitely not a headache. So if you happen to be doing so, or you're constantly switching back and forth between eyes, that just means you have to dial in your night vision regarding your eye relief, diopter, manual gain, etc. When it comes to setting up my rifles for night vision, I do like to have both active aiming capabilities and passive. That way, if my active goes down, I can go passive or vice versa. Just like you'd have a set of backup iron sights for your red dot or your holographic sight, just in case that optic goes down, you can go straight over to your iron sights. And in some situations, passive may be better than active because every time you press this button, you do put out a signature which could easily be tracked back to your rifle and yourself. It does help to have some type of riser or tall optic mount for your optic if you want to aim passively. The fast riser from Unity Tactical is awesome. You can also put a red dot on it. It's made for the Eotech, but anything that will fit on this riser will work. I've used it with the Aimpoints before. If you're on a budget, this is the Yankee Machine half-inch riser. They do have different sizes. These were pretty good actually. They maintain a zero just fine. For LPVOs, you have the Unity Fast LPVO mount. I really like this thing. The lowest I'd want to go is a lower 1/3 co-witness. This is my Aimpoint Compline 4. Still has the stock mount. I do passively aim with this, but my tube basically bottoms out on the rifle, so I cannot go any lower than a lower 1/3 co-witness. My favorite optic for passive shooting is going to be the Eotech. I'll actually roll in a short clip of me looking through an Eotech with night vision. Aimpoints are also great. This is the Compline 4. I do passively shoot with this a lot. Glass is acceptable. Reticle looks nice. Has a lot of night vision settings, so that's pretty cool. When it comes to magnified optics, some of them are usable under night vision, some of them are crap. Just depends on the optic, of course. For example, this NightForce NX8 does have passive capability to an extent. There's a reason I've kept the tall mount on it, and that's because it is usable under night vision. I do have my diopter marked with a paint pen, so I know exactly where I need to turn it to see through it best with my night vision. So I would play around with your optic. Make sure you have your diopter marked so you know where you need to turn it to see through it best with your tube. Another thing it's good at is flipping it up to 8x, looking through it as an observation device, and spotlighting with my illuminator, or even just passively aiming with the illuminator. It does help a lot if I actually use that IR. So I do passively aim with this, but not always my first choice. I zero both my optics and my lasers for 50 yards. With the IR lasers, most of them have an offset laser and offset illuminator, so you do have to take that into account when you're going to zero it. You have two primary zeros. You got a converging zero and a parallel zero. Converging zero means, say at 50 yards, point of aim, point of impact, but if I shoot out to 100, my point of impact will get further and further to the right the farther out I go. So I do use a parallel zero, which means my point of impact is always going to be slightly left of my point of aim. Having a high-powered vis laser definitely helps. Also, having magnification also helps. If I zero this rifle, I would just align the laser with the crosshairs. I'll make sure this is on 8x, make sure this is on high-powered visible laser, and I can easily get this on paper in like 2 or 3 shots. Then later, I will go out at night and confirm with my IR laser. Most devices, if they have a visible laser, they have a slaved vis laser with your IR laser. But I've never had one that was perfect, so you always want to confirm with your IR laser and your night vision. Although this does have an offset laser, and I do use a parallel zero, if I'm shooting actively up close, I slightly cant the rifle, and now my laser is directly over my bore, so it's just like using an optic now. I do mount my IR device at 12 o'clock all the way forward. I think that's the most practical choice, especially for a DBAL. The battery compartment is in the front, so I cannot mount a front sight directly in front of this. Unless, of course, I do want to remove the front sight or the DBAL if I want to change out the battery. So I don't recommend you do that, especially if you use this thing a lot, because you will be changing out the battery. And if you remove one of those things, you do have to confirm the zero. So I think the most practical choice, especially if you have a very short rail, is just to either remove your front sight and put it right here, or get a leaf sight. And that means you can just directly screw in a leaf sight to the top of the DBAL. I do like to use a pressure pad when I'm using the DBAL, just because the buttons are pretty tiny on all of them. So I do like having something much larger to press, so I'm less likely to miss this tiny little button under stress. Some people don't like having some type of dual pressure pad for their light and laser because they're worried they're going to mix up one of these buttons, which I do understand. So they do like to use the tail cap on their light. The theory is they have to go more up and out of the way to press that tail cap, and they're less likely to confuse them or get a white light AD, which I do completely understand. The RO devices that I use are the full power DBAL A2s. I will make a dedicated video on this device just because there's not a lot of information on YouTube about it. And I do have a lot of experience with both of these lasers. One of the reasons I use them is obviously because of the output, but because I can get these a little bit cheaper than buying a brand new A3 or D2, which are the civilian power lasers. And people who say civilians don't need a full power laser kind of remind me of Democrats who say you don't need an AR-15. If you're shooting alone in the desert or the forest, you may not realize the potential of having a high power laser, but in some type of without WROL loss situation, it's definitely beneficial to have more output for a variety of reasons, which I won't go into in this video, but let's just say high powered lasers do have more applications than just night vision shooting. Alright guys, that's going to be it for this video. I will be making a review on a PBS-14 and a overview of the DBAL A2 in the future, so do look out for those videos sometime in the next couple weeks. I thank all of you guys for watching. If you have any questions, comments, of course, leave them down below, and I'll see you guys later.